Welcome to my late night thoughts. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. It's Monday, March 1st. It's only 8:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, but it is the middle of the night somewhere, and I may as well be up at midnight doing this. I did want to go to bed early, though, and do an early show tomorrow, hopefully. All things going well. So I'm cheating, and it doesn't matter because it's the internet, and it's not like anyone listens to the show live yet. It hasn't. I don't do it at one particular time often enough, and it hasn't garnered such a large enough worldwide audience. Well, it already has a worldwide audience, so I mean, I guess there's that. But it's not like we're hundreds of thousands of people listening to my show. It's like dozens and dozens. And to those people listening, I humbly say to you, my deepest gratitude. May you be intrigued, bemused, and even sometimes entertained by my podcasting shenanigans. And here we are. Dear friends, what was keeping me up tonight? I mean, not literally, but figuratively. I am gnashing my teeth not in actual stress, because I don't, because I am sort of aware of the whole point of Zen and or holistic spiritual practices, generically speaking. But in that sort of, I'm still part of the mundane world kind of way. Deeply concerned and therefore animated to speak about the state of the world. And I've been trying to think of I ramble and I speak my mind and I say clearly what I think, but have I really nailed it yet in terms of a succinct critical critique? Not hate, not judgment, not fight against, not argument for the negation of, but critique of hey, whoa, folks, I think we're doing it all wrong. And I use an inclusive we, folks, because let's be honest, what human being is perfect and free of flaws? I know that some would instantly jump to some of, their favorite enlightened being or prophetic saint or etc. The typical and the atypical answers apply. But look at Myanmar and look at Trumptopia, and one can see that that some sort of deep critical failure to really live up to that which as flawed as its original content may be, these organized religions that these different cultures seem to pretend to adhere to. And I know that can sound offensive, right? I'm not out to offend anybody. But if there's any evidence anywhere in the current milieu, the current stage of things, the current set of activities going on in the world to sort of support my overall thesis that there is a hijacking going on of all great, profound human institutions, is that, is this idolatry of ideology that's becoming ever so increasingly painfully obvious. Therefore, I hope harder and harder to just pretend isn't there, to ignore. I mean, there was a literal golden statue of Donald Trump wheeled into the auditorium and apparently, gathered around by many a supporter and, wept about and prayed around and touched as if itself were some sort of holy object. This is quite literally, and also kind of funny, also quite figuratively, idolatry. which I don't know about you, but the last time I read the Bible is a big no-no. Not supposed to do it. Remember the story, the golden calf? What's his name came down from the thing, was like, the hell are you doing? You're literally praying to a giant pile of shiny metal. And as if it isn't bad enough that we have just witnessed a contemporary, postmodern, literal, undeniable, organically manifested expression of the closest thing to it, straight back pointing to that story in the Bible, just now, over the weekend. It's, some of us have been like, oh, hey, 7-alarm fire, this guy, either on purpose or through some sort of, interesting shenanigans of the spiritual kind, unconsciously is building for himself a cult of personality around him, with a personal loyalty pledge and a willingness to commit violence amongst its base. And a sort of self-delusional denial that, when something goes wonky, well, it wasn't us. It was some nefarious infiltrators. How much more obviously, creepy, fucked up cultish do you need to be? And dare I be so bold, friends, as to point you towards my body of work. This is the labor of love that I do, this podcast. I don't have a script. It is real, raw, radically unscripted. It's just me and my deep thoughts, whatever time of day. And right now I bring to you sort of one of the gooey nugget centers of my personal real life and also literary, figuratively and literary. As in, I'm hoping to complete a series of science fiction books in which all of this is like the fabric of the real life society as an extension of what we're seeing today. But I digress. The milieu that we exist in, the current context, the moment, the sort of critical tipping point moment that we're living in, is we're being seduced by whatever mechanisms of our own individual and collective psychologies and spiritual, the spiritual extensions thereof, into falling in love with or accepting or endorsing and living passionately for an idolatry of ideology. And as defined by the dictionary, idolatry is the worship of idols. Bullet point: an extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. Now, that doesn't sound that bad. The example sentence, quote, "We must not allow our idolatry of art to obscure issues of political significance," close quote. And I giggle there because really, if I were the editor of this issuance, of this blurb here, I've been like, we must not allow our idolatry of politics and politicians to obscure issues of political significance. Because quite seriously, that's where we're at. And it is not exclusively the purview of the extreme alt-right. It's happening in dressed up, watered down ways everywhere, in all directions of the political ideological spectrum. Because it isn't that we're falling under the tyranny of Donald Trump himself personally. It's that the literal social machinery, and also the spiritual social machinery around us is intoxicated with the idolatry of ideologies as like the ideology itself. Now, I see the argument of what is ideology even? Like, how do you even define that? I always love dictionaries. I've deep fondness. In fact, I currently lament the fact that somehow or another, during the many stages of my life and the many times that I've moved, I've lost my multiple dictionaries that I once were very proud to keep on my bookshelf. Because I loved the sort of nuanced differences in the approach to language that each of the dictionaries took. I had like 3 different dictionaries. And I'm a nerd, right? I'm a big fucking word geek. Ideology. Noun, a system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economics or political theory and policy. And I find this delightful and sort of like, ooh, is this an aha moment? The actual example sentence is, quote, the ideology of democracy. In the little similar column, beliefs, ideas, ideals. Archaic, the science of ideas, the study of their origin and nature. Now, that is a fascinating nuance, right? Like archaic, as in we don't use it this way anymore. This is what it originally meant, and now it has been changed. Now, some would mock me, but I'm an avid endorser of the idea. Language is common use. The fact that the words coined on cartoon shows have made it into the dictionary is both humorous, bizarre, and kind of revelatory of the mind, collectively speaking. But I digress. This is sort of also an important and interesting point that in all areas of human endeavor, either blindly through the blind evolutionary process of cumulative use, abuse, neglect, of the way our minds treats, and the way our minds as individuals and as collectives over time treats language and words. What does it reveal to you, dear friends? And this is a happy accident. Like, I didn't stage this. I didn't plan this. I just thought in the few minutes of like preparing just now, like, I should have these opened up, right? Because I often like don't have a thing, a page to. I was like, if I'm going to talk about the ideology of, this critique of living in an ideological world of idolatry of ideology, I should have those 2 words ready to be clearly defined so that it's understood that I have some working understanding of what the words mean. And I'm aware of this fact, but it wasn't on the forefront of my mind when I set up for today's episode. But this all resonates deeply with my meta-cosmological spiritual theory. Now, plenty of people are out there going, yeah, they're dumbing us down, and the education this, and blah, blah, blah. Of course. George Carlin, right? If you've never listened to George Carlin, go. He's like this trifecta of people's work that are still out there. George Carlin, Alan Watts, and Terence McKenna. Like, go listen to all 3 of them. There's plenty of things all over YouTube, etc. and whatnot. Because no matter how much fear-mongering of our loss of our freedoms and blah, 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 like, it's still pretty, like, not horrible just yet globally, right? There's examples of some awfulness here and there, but we haven't totally, gotten to the place where the fearmongers want us to live in our minds, as far as I can tell. I think. I could be wrong. But where we are very, very fastly approaching, as McKenna warns, the entropy of the world, of our collective hallucination, because the world is that, right? Keeping in mind that illusions are not fake, they're They are real. They just aren't what they appear to be at first. We have this collective hallucination of culture and the world of our society and our societal recent events. And we're very quickly approaching in a sort of escalating way towards a world where we will tribalistically aggregate around ideological constructs that are never questioned, that are never investigated, and that are increasingly redonkulous, instead of approaching a place where we are, as individuals and as a collective, experiencing a deeper broadening of everyone's overall comprehension and interest in the sort of true original sense of scientific studies as experiential and wisdom building tools for the masses, right? Like, we aren't becoming more well-rounded, intellectually nourished, intellectually, there's the opposite thing going on, so much that we're changing our words and limiting ourselves in how words work, to the point where we bend over backwards to defend the poster, the current celebrity du jour of our political ideations, of our political ideological tribes, instead of doing all the really critical work required to actually achieve like the solutions that would mean something and solve the problems that our political ideologies that we cling to create in the first place. I'll leave you to contemplate that for a minute, because DJ Zed is reminding me with his animatronic eyeballs and that jet blue steel glare of his that I'm running a little over time on the music schedule. Let's live it up a hot second. Enjoy, my friends, a little uplifting D&B groove pad audio entertainment called Party Patterns and Passions. Groovin' track, DJ Zed. Thank you for your contribution today of the audio entertainment. It's a mighty thing to be able to just like wiggle and let it out. Boom. Make sure I don't play that again. I try to not be too redundant. Welcome back to the show, folks. It's Late Night Thoughts with myself, your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And now a completely different track of thinking. I'd like to read for you a quote. I don't know this person's work profoundly. I just came across this quote. And I'll be honest, I haven't done like a due diligence check. Is this guy got flaws? Probably. Is this person a woman? Maybe. I don't know. Who knows? Are they a horrible sociopath that shouldn't be honored for this one shining, interestingly weird, accurate as fuck quote? Perhaps. Who knows? But from the mouths of mad persons and saints, the divinity speaks sometimes. But yeah, some people are such horrible persons that their words should just be chucked out and never once really considered. Especially if they don't transcend the horrificness of whatever horribleness we might judge about them, right? Anyways, like I said, I'm just saying I don't know who this person is. And I probably shoulda, coulda, woulda. But we're here. And it's now. And I'm going to read it anyways. Because honestly, when I read this, it kind of like went, it just rung. It just resonated and like hit this bell deep down inside. Quote. And forgive me, this is written from a time, this is not the quote. This is me interjecting after saying quote. I just realized that this is written in that archaic form of gender assigned masculinity, and I'm just going to read it, so just ignore it, like forgive it. It'd be great if this were more gender neutral or inclusive, but just assume that I'm not a gender exclusive person, because I'm not. The quote is, however, written about like man. Quote, every man has forgotten who he is. One may understand the cosmos, but never the ego. The self is more distant than any star. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God, but thou shalt not know thyself. We are all under the same mental calamity. We have all forgotten our names. We have all forgotten what we really are. All that we call common sense and rationality and practicality and positivism, I hate that word, I can't pronounce it, only means that for certain dead levels of our life, we forget that we have forgotten. All that we call spirit and art and ecstasy only means that for one awful moment, we remember that we forgot. G.K. Chesterton. I don't know where this came from, but my mind has a lot of like things it wants to unpack about that. Because this is accurate as fuck. Pardon the language. The show is marked explicit because I like to say things like fuck. If that offends you, tough. Because I consider it a funny sound that is, like a word that means exclamation point. And I never hardly ever use it in a sort of like that mean, horrible, at you kind of way. But maybe we do need different words, and maybe we do need to retire certain that are just loaded with baggage. But that's got nothing to do with this quote. This passage is profound because we are at this crux, right? There's this growing, fomenting, pseudo-Christian, angry, victimization ideology that's fomenting violence. And that is, its pedigree is like, it is the remnants of the worldwide empire that once owned the world. let us not forget that. Whatever you think of the Roman Catholic Church in its current status, and mind you, I'm not an arbitrary hater of any church, of any organized religion. And I am, as I was saying about states, when I say Texas, I mean the bureaucracy and the elected officials and the secondary and tertiary hangers on that are part of the system. And those are people, right? Those are people doing those jobs. But I don't mean the people. I mean their collective efforts as parts of the system. If I mean the people of Texas, I try to say the people of Texas. I've got no beef with the people of Texas. And except for the ones that are like angry racists that want to kill everybody. But that's always true. And it's got nothing to do with whatever state you're in, right? There are angry racists that want to kill everybody everywhere. And what is that about? Let's not get sidetracked with the race part and consider that it's a dehumanization of anybody regardless. And that the people who live at that extreme don't understand themselves and don't understand others, and therefore can dehumanify, like make an object of anyone in their mind. Now, what would allow a person to get to that place? We could rationalize it a bunch of different ways. But I like to flip that kind of question inside out and be like, what would be the one condition under which that could not be possible? Then we're no longer fighting or arguing and lowering ourselves to reactionary violence, right? Because just there are people, I've said this before, but like punch a Nazi, why? Then eventually you become anti-Nazi Nazis, right? Like, where do you not see how negation of other is exactly that which we abhor in all the villains of the world history that you're surrounded by? No matter who they are, no matter what they did. If we're being honest, and they really were villainous, there's a lot of false vilification of other, and that gets cleared up in rational thinking. But those who truly have achieved villainy have done so because they are disconnected from the truest understanding of one's own nature. Now, like I said, what's the one condition under which it would render all of those problems impossible? If our understanding of ourselves, and here's my proposition, right? If our understanding of ourselves was along the lines of these deep mysticisms, these deep spiritual messages, that you are divinity, rather, you are not divinity. Divinity is you, making you, being you, and everyone else, and that divinity is a unity, a oneness, and therefore you are everyone else, and everyone else is you. And if all human individuals could understand that in an inner workings, undeniable, undebunkable, because they came to the undeniable conclusion themselves through whatever inner phenomena is necessary for that to be just unbearably true to someone, then wouldn't you want to vote for that with your mind, first of all? Wouldn't you want to investigate that to see if it's possible and true, second of all? Third of all, wouldn't you encourage others to do the same? Because if we achieved that, if we unlocked that challenge, if we passed that test, and the species was healed, spiritually speaking, in all the complicated ways that it would be necessary for the species to be healed spiritually, to the point where everyone deeply lived that reality. I don't want to call it a truth, because then we start arguing about whose truth, but it's a reality, the way the sun and the moon, no matter whether or not you think they're made, whatever, forget about what we think they might be. They are, right? They exist, and we understand them as they exist because we can interact with them directly at that level. The undeniable things like fire burns, undeniable. You can't pretend otherwise. This is our great falling, we, all of us, every human individual, and I mean in a way that includes us here now that are capable of discussing it, right? I'm not an enlightened being, at least not yet. Not in the sense that like I have shed this skin and become pure being of light. But I have come to understand that is the evolutionary direction that the species is going in. This is what the forgetting means. And it's a sort of beautiful sort of state of ultimately there's nothing to fear or fight about, because it's as if, the buds on the branch of a tree were arguing about which political ideology was most righteous and true and necessary in order to bear the most ripest fruit. That's just not the way it works, right? Trees don't need ideology. The grass, the birds in the sky, the fish in the water. And it's not because they're dumb beasts that are incapable of doing it. I mean, perhaps that's a pretty strong sounding argument. But I'll give you this. Imagine, if you will, for a hot second, that all those different things they were equal and on par to any human intellectual mind and could develop ideology if they wanted to. But they were still trees and birds in the air and fish in the water. Would they need them? Of course not. Right? They wouldn't need them. Why? They already exist in the most profoundly beautiful way possible as themselves doing what they want. Who's ruining things? Who's putting insoluble crap in the system so that it can no longer flow and be healthy and provide for all? This species right here, 2 thumbs at this guy, right? And we are all that. We are all collectively inseparable from the human species. I mean, except those of us who are artificial replicants from a future dimension. But I'm so incredibly it doesn't matter, right? Like, life is life. And literary fiction is literary fiction. You see my point. And if you're confused by the literary fiction stuff, go to Wattpad. I'm not going to drop the link here. We're living this curse that Chesterton points out to. We love the Lord, the God, but we love it so inaccurately that we're willing to kill each other over which God it is you're supposed to love. Because we do not know ourselves in the sense that ancient saying, know thyself, truly means. Now, mind you, I speak in broad strokes. There are truly millions and millions of people. Oh, hello, I forgot to put the thing on no sound. There are millions of people that are having these epiphanies and realizing, oh, wow, that's certainly not the way to go. But the entropy of systemic hijacking by the machinations of ego reaches, yes, even into spiritual community and spiritual jargon of, because spiritual culture is still culture, and culture hijacking is what ego does. Individual persona corruption is what ego does, right? Those are the two. There was a phrase. It's a manifold pincer maneuver of echo chambering ourselves. And to cut right to the chase, you can point fingers and blame that group or this group or whatever the group, but the root cause isn't any individual or group of people. It's like the rotten, festering spiritual trauma that we've inherited and that we perpetuate on ourselves, that's like our spiritual pollution, right? Like a factory pollutes the air because it's doing what it's doing in absolute disrespect of how natural systems work and how they need to be clean in order to be healthy, and how they're inseparable. It's a global, interconnected, finite web, right? Like, we live in a finite space, this womb of ours, this place we call Earth, which is not a place, but a living being that's in the process of giving birth to us. We are like, imagine a family of twins living in a giant baby mama's belly in the biologically correct, place. I just mean figuratively, the belly, in some sort of crazy mythology. Imagine a tribe of twins, and they've built this stuff inside the womb, neglecting that they're not going to be there forever. We are here for an excruciatingly long period of time. But we've made it our entire business to ransack and destroy, for the purposes of commodification and profiteering on the rendered products, the womb itself. If it were actual babies inside an actual mother's womb, you would instantly go, "Oh God, the horror! What madness! How could they?" But because it's this beautiful, miraculous, magical, quote-unquote place, it is the result that even when we know, we forget, right? Like, even I am not fully free of this. We've built it as intrinsically in webbing as nature itself. Our disastrous, caustic, toxic thing we call society. But we know the answers. We truly know the solution. We have it in us to change. And better yet, because I think most people think of it in confrontational terms, right? Because, why do we think of everything in confrontational terms? Because the ideology tells us to. That's why it's such a radically brilliant solution. So everyone just take a break from ideology. Let's not have a war to end ideologies. Let's not kill each other. And let's just all agree to take a 10-year break. And no ideologies. No political ideologies. That doesn't mean chaos. That doesn't mean no law. That doesn't mean lack of order. It just means let's just agree to not make it about left versus right, this group versus that group, etc., etc., etc. Let's agree to not make it about ideological constructs. And and the people who refuse to play along, well, just let them do what they're doing, and they'll quickly see. But if humanity just went, enough with the ideological constructs. How does the world actually work, and what is it for reals? Let's remember that. And those are the miracles. Those are the divine gifts. Those are the beautiful things. The mysteries. The things that are ridiculed, marginalized, trapped in a bottle and put on a shelf, and neglected so that future generations live blind of them. But miraculously, you can connect to deep within simply by exploring your inner universe. You have an entire hidden away existence where you can perceive in interesting and fascinating ways, alone, with the aid of breathing techniques and other interesting tools, the inner workings not only of your mind, but of the collective mind consciousness field that literally is the universe. Don't take my word for it. You don't even need, I'm not talking about enlightenment. I'm not talking about my third eye's open and I'm, some special being bowed down to me. No, that's ego trap, obviously. I mean what the Buddha says when he's asked, Master, what did you achieve? What did you gain with enlightenment? I gained nothing. But let me tell you what I no longer. What is it? How does it phrased? I gained nothing, but let me tell you what I lost. And the other one, and there's a list there, and I don't have it handy in my brain. But the other one, which is I think even more brilliantly true, right? Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. There is a realm of awakenings and realizations and deep, profound insights, and a sort of returning to a peak modality of being in our bodies as spiritual beings. Understanding and recognizing that we are not our bodies, that we are the spiritual beings that manifested the bodies, that the body is truly a tool like a car that you get in and out of. That is what we have forgotten, and that art and soul and spirit and the crafts of those things in their own fun, quirky, often flawed, often quickly hijacked kind of ways try to remind us of. And that we have to address the healing, because this hijacking that I refer to, it will not end it will not be stopped by the butchering of any given individual. Like that just makes it worse, right? We can't go to war about this. That just makes it worse. Going to war to heal the species is nonsense. It is, as Mr. Chesterton says, a mental calamity. And that's one of the keys to solving it. It's purely in our minds. We made up political ideology. We can reorganize it, re-engineer it as we so please, with mutual consent and with the obvious, as long as it's not about oppressing each other and killing one another. Which technically it's not overtly yet, most of the world. But it's wanting to entropy towards that. Why? Not because effing lizard people or sociopathic robots from an evil dimension or the Chinese or the Russians, or because spiritually the entire freaking species is rotten drunk on toxic waste. And we are truly, dear friends, stuck in this together. The upside, dear friends, should you be stressed out by that last bit of verbal verbiage I slew at you, the silver lining, dear friends, is that because we're all stuck in it together, because it is a collective phenomena, we don't have to do things the way, all the wrong answers and the fear-mongering and the crazy talk of the past has, made us think we should. We can literally manifest collectively a tipping point moment and a process, right? Because it's not... There's this within the spiritual community, right? Which I think there is an active, ongoing infiltration of hijacking type phenomena happening to it, because a lot of spiritual people from any club of spiritualism, whatever brand of spiritual practice you want, you find people falling into classic ego traps and having classic foibles and falling apart. And that's because when we abstract away from direct personal practice into ideological ideation, the idolatry of ideological construct, the unexplained sort of addiction to clinging to constructs without questioning and being pushed to extremes, it's easy to live in that forgetfulness. But being a collective species, we are as much as we are truly individuals, we are also this like collective, this hive mind, this unity, this oneness, right? Because it can be identified and personally experienced. So therein lies like not just the sort of the shining light at the end of the tunnel, but the key to the lock and the lock itself. As individuals, as a collective, we are the key and the lock. So you don't need to take my word for it. You need to go and question the world and question, everything for yourself, but also set it all down. Set it all down and look within, like in that way that is about just being, without anticipation, without expectation, without demand, without put it in my hand and show it to me, because it doesn't work that way, right? And many argue that that's crazy talk, and I'm like, but have you tried it? It's hard work, yes. And by comparison to all the delights, especially the visual delights and the thrilling entertainments of the mundane world, it seems a little tedious. But it's an acquired taste that it's like coming home. Ram Dass said, we're all walking each other home. That's the walking each other home part. We're not only supposed to meditate as individuals, but also as collectives. Like, huzzah to the millions of people who meditate together. Because there are, right? And all of us who do, and all those who do, there's still more of that like boundary breaking work to do, because there's still these divisions. So it's this recursive spiraling process. But the truly awe-inspiring bit that I'm trying to land on and kind of like stick it as the end of the show is that there's this inexorable, undebunkable, profoundly fascinating intimacy to it. That it's like, no matter what form it takes, like I can't predict it. I can share with you weird examples of things I've experienced that are the set of phenomena that makes it, for me, a settled thing. Like I don't know how else to put it, but like, like I'm not in a place in my life where I'm wondering if the spiritual mystics and the Zenists and the Buddhists are onto something. I think, each in their own way, definitely yes. And also the entropy of ego is creeping in from all sides. And that no matter how you slice it, the ultimate sort of, okay, there's a meme I'm thinking of that I wish I could say this, what this image represents in a sentence other than describing it, right? But you've seen it. It's the interesting multifaceted object floating in the middle of a room with three beams of light, right? Each one projecting a different shadow. The phenomena at the center of your being will express itself in an multitude of ways, as many as there are individuals. But once you get into the deep work of integrating those two opposites, the light and the dark, which are not at war with each other, right? It's not about killing your ego. It's not about destroying the light. Those are all flawed human metaphors. It's about healing, being the healing, right? Be the healer. Be the act of healing, and be that which is healed. That's your calling as a human individual, independent of whatever the fuck else you choose to do. There's no need to get rid of some of the fun things of having careers and making art and stuff. But literally the spiritual calling, the teachings that were taught to us by those that seem to be living examples of this potentiality, is to be that, right? To understand through phenomenological experiencing that we are, that I am, that you are, each of us are the observer, the perceiver, the lens of perception, and that which is perceived. That's the true trinity of the wonder, the magic, the divinity of life. And there is no need for ideology about it. There is a need to experience that in order to engage with that, being that, understanding that one is that, and acknowledging and honoring that everyone else is that. No matter how messed up and wonky their current persona mask may be, how irritating, how nefariously evil, everybody is that. And that if we want to stop fucking around with this polemic of good versus evil and suffering versus pleasure, we can achieve a radically different expression of society, right? Here and now. Because then we can begin the actual work of achieving the multiple other steps required to unlock the whole, we're now, as a species level, pure beings of light. Although, it still could just snap into place instantly. Having said all that, I leave it to you, friends. Go heal yourselves. Go know thyself. Don't take my word for it. Don't take my instruction about it. Don't take anybody's. I'll leave you with one final musical entertainment, I think. No, I'll leave with the one I started. I think I might make this the Late Night Thoughts theme music officially, because I kind of dig it and fits the vibe. So I'll play it out again. Here we go. Boom. That's the plan.